Ladies and gentlemen, if you would, this is a joint Budget and Finance and Public Works Committee meeting where we do have one issue on the agenda. First of all, I want to, before we get started, introduce Chairman Elrod with the Public Works Committee, and then myself. And then we have 4 special guests. But before we do, I will have Councilman Davis. I'm going to read the bill, and then you make your recommendation. BL 2016-343, Councilman Anthony Davis, Elrod, Councilman Elrod are sponsors. Amends the Metro Code by adding a new chapter to facilitate efficient access and to enhance the public safety and convenience for assessing the public right-of-way to manage communication facilities. That is a motion. Do we have a motion, please? Duly seconded. Councilman Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a couple comments, but wanted to announce at the beginning of the meeting that I am planning to seek a 1-meeting deferral, just out of respect for my colleagues here and just to ensure everyone's able to get these questions answered tonight. Everyone can get their questions asked and answered. Tonight is a good opportunity for everyone to do that. Want to make sure we have time for amendments. That's another reason for the deferral. And then third, just the whole kind of get in the room conversation that's going on. Obviously, we're going to have a really good discussion tonight. We get to hear from a lot of the stakeholders. Sounds like all parties, even after this meeting, have agreed to meet, continue discussions. I think it's important to note that discussions have been going on for a long time on deployment of fiber in Nashville here for many months. The bottom line, in my estimation, is we have a broken system when it comes to deploying fiber on the poles in our right-of-way. I'm hopeful the stakeholders can continue these meetings after, but I just want to caution, we have to manage our expectations of what we can come out of those and where we move forward from there. But this is, again, a great opportunity tonight. I thank everyone for being here. I know my colleagues have a lot to learn, as I do, learn something new every day on this issue, and I'm just looking forward to hearing from everybody and seeing where we go from there. And then 3 weeks from now, we're able to vote. We're going to keep it on second reading so that if there are any amendments, we can make them, and then we're able to vote on second reading at the next meeting. So just wanted to explain that to my colleagues as where we intended to go tonight as we have the discussions. But make sure you get all your questions out there and answered. Thank you.
So you're making a motion for a...
We'll go ahead and move the motion, for the purpose of discussion for a 1-meeting deferral.
Okay, duly seconded. And we have discussion. What we can do at this point, before we get started, introduce the guests. Councilman Elrod, do you have any opening remarks?
I just want to thank all of our guests for being here. We appreciate y'all being here, and for the council members and putting the bill forward. Councilman Davis is sponsoring. I think he referenced a broken system. Nashville's a 93% aerial city built on limestone, so we're a unique city in that we're not able to put much underground. So that requires a pole attachment infrastructure that meets the needs of a growing city. When just a few decades ago we had a phone company, a cable company, and that was about it. Now we have 3 large telecom providers and dozens of other attachers, and we need a municipal system or code that respects that and understands that, and will make the needed changes so that those telecom companies can get better service to our residents and our consumers. So I appreciate the parties being here, and I hope that these talks continue. However, the purpose of the legislation is to make significant changes. So Councilman Davis, it's his bill, but I would encourage the parties that if there's not significant changes, that the bill needs to go forward as it is. And the current system isn't working. So I'll defer to you, Councilman Pridemore.
Thank you, Councilman. Ms. Phillips, if you would, we'll just start with you. If you could just introduce yourself, and we'll go right down the line, and then you can proceed. Councilman Murphy.
Thank you. This might be better directed at Mr. Jameson. I have an amendment for this bill, and does do we need a motion for that to be deferred or lay that on the table, or does that just track to the next meeting? Okay, so I do not need to introduce or anything like that. Thank you. And when it's being deferred one meeting, it's re-referred to this joint committee? Is that what you? Or just the sole individual meetings separately or held together, or
Wait,
however
how many people are
Foley would
asking?
like.
Yeah. Did you get the answer you need from Mr. Jameson?
My answer, I did get my answer, and so I think we are seeking clarification on what we are deferring to a joint or separate meetings.
And Chair, the intention would be that we would take a committee vote next meeting. If hopefully I made my motion correctly, we would vote to, it would be before committee again.
The only motion that we'll be voting on at this point is a motion for deferral. Right. Tonight, at the end of the presentation. All right, thank you. Is Council Lady Murphy that? Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm going to change the protocol here just a minute. Since it is been advised by Councilman Elrod that it is the Google's bill that we recommend that Google should go first, that would be Mr. Levendos, if you would mind just introducing yourself, and the floor is yours.
Vice Chairs Wiener and Cooper and fellow members of the Metro Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about this ordinance tonight. My name is Chris Levendos, and I head up the Network Deployment and Operations Organization for Google Fiber nationally. I've been at Google Fiber for the past 2 years. Prior to that, I spent 26 years building infrastructure at Verizon. I began my career as an outside plant technician in Harlem, New York. I was a member of the CWA and a shop steward. I worked my way up to become the regional president of Verizon's New York City wireline operations before joining Google Fiber. At Google Fiber, we have been thrilled to work closely with Nashville as we have begun construction of our new fiber-to-the-home broadband network. This process involves touching over 88,000 utility poles across the county and thousands of miles of construction. It is a big, complex process, as you know. Along with the employees working in our office, we have engaged a significant workforce to help with customer service, customer installations, construction, sales, marketing, and more. After working with the city staff on joint planning process, we broke ground last year and started to sign up a few buildings earlier this year. We are also partnering with the local community organizations to help address the digital divide here in Nashville. In fact, just 2 days ago, we began offering free gigabit speed connections to MDHA's Edge Hill apartments, and we hope to serve more public and affordable housing in this way. With support from Google Fiber, Solima Urban Ministries established a staffed mobile computer lab to offer digital literacy training to residents in Edge Hill and the park at Hillside. We have also sponsored 2 minority entrepreneur events to help them expand their digital footprint and know what tools are available to support the development of their business. These are just a few examples of our partnerships with local nonprofits, and we're just getting started. I would suggest to you that I joined Google Fiber after 26 years with an incumbent in this industry, not simply just to come here and build more infrastructure. I came here to join the multi-spirited effort of Google Fiber and looking to do more than just build fiber and create a supercharged network for the city of Nashville, offering the state-of-the-art infrastructure as well as services, but to also support tremendous issues along the digital divide. But unfortunately, our ability to build broadly and quickly is limited today because of delays attaching to utility poles. As I mentioned before, for the build effort that we have planned, we need to attach to 88,000 utility poles. So that's what we're hoping to see fixed through this ordinance. There's been a lot of discussion and debate about this common sense policy, and we can get into the deep details, but I want to bring attention to 3 key points. First, everyone agrees that the current process of attaching to utility poles is fundamentally broken for supporting efficient investment. The process that exists today has been fine in general for the supporting of incumbency and diversity as far as competition. When you had traditional phone companies and traditional cable TV companies, there was little to no infringement as far as space on poles, and the process as far as the number of efforts required was quite minimal, and there was not competition amongst these services. Fast forward to today, specifically here in Nashville, and there are numerous attachers, and there is cross-competition of all services, which creates all kinds of boundaries and complexity for this process. Second, with every day that this problem persists, the city and its residents are denied further economic and social benefits. Third, One Touch provides a common sense solution. This isn't just about Google Fiber. It's about anyone building a network here in Nashville. Indeed, as Comcast recently said in the Tennessean, all broadband providers face numerous challenges in Nashville with the make-ready and permitting processes that have impacted timely deployment and expansion of broadband facilities. Today, it can take multiple workforce visits and many months to prepare a single utility pole for fiber attachments. That work is done sequentially, with each attacher sending different crews one after the other. Single utility poles usually run in the public right-of-way, but also through private yards. Thus, pole work disturbs local residents every time a pole needs to be visited, including multiple permitting and multiple possible road closures in serial fashion through the use of the existing process. And in practice, the results we've experienced reinforce that the system is broken. Let me break down the numbers based on the data from our latest monthly meeting between Nashville Electric Service executives just 2 weeks ago. As of July, there were already 9,442 poles approved by NES where make-ready is needed, and work has been requested for 5,398 moves. But only 15 poles were made ready in July for complete make-ready efforts, bringing the total to date to 33 poles. We are submitting applications to NES for between 1,000 and 1,500 poles per week. The number of attachers and moves required vary from pole to pole, but on average, there are multiple tasks for each pole. There are over 16,000 tasks in the queue as of July, and only 1,141 have been completed. Several attachers are taking more than 90 days to do their make-ready work. Each attacher waits for the other to move first, so these delays add up quickly. Even if some poles don't require make-ready work, the fact is a single delayed pole can prevent us from deploying in an entire area for many, many months. Comparable delays happen across all poles regardless of pole owner. Now consider this challenge across the whole city. As I noted, we expected to place fiber optic cables on around 88,000 poles in the county. Our projections suggest that we will have submitted over 23,000 poles by the end of this year that will require make-ready, but fewer than 1,000 poles will have been made ready by then. And everyone can agree that fixing the problem is essential, given that internet access is key infrastructure for the future of the city and its residents. Today, there's a wave of new research, applications, and examples that show the transformative impact of ultra-fast broadband speeds on local economies. One recent study found that 14 communities enjoyed approximately $1.4 billion in additional GDP when gigabit broadband became widely available. Other cities in the region are already experiencing these benefits. Chattanooga has had gigabit fiber for several years, and an independent study found that their network has generated around $1 billion in economic and social benefits and created thousands of new jobs. We've seen these types of benefits firsthand where we're deploying Google Fiber, with the most evident gains in our first city, Kansas City. Our build sparked the launch of the Kansas City Startup Village, with dozens of startups and entrepreneurs moving to the area to build their businesses. Let me share just 3 examples. French cloud computing firm BIME Analytics picked Kansas City for its North American headquarters, noting that fiber validated Kansas City as a technology town. Thanks to Google Fiber's small business offering in Kansas City, the Inland Sea Production, a documentary filmmaker, no longer has to FedEx hard drives to clients and outsource production because of their slow connections. Finally, Propaganda 3, a software and mobile app development shop, couldn't reliably access large files in the cloud. Fiber is now helping them share files quickly. Residents' pocketbooks benefit directly from this competition too. Of course, simply put, choice is good for consumers. Our entry in Kansas City drove a race to the top, with incumbent providers increasing speeds and lowering prices. For instance, after Google Fiber entered the market, Time Warner started offering a 100 megabit service, double the top speed previously available. They also upgraded all customers on their basic service tiers from 10 to 15 megabits per second, increased their turbo service from 15 to 20, and most importantly, cut their prices by 30%. Time Warner went on to launch free Wi-Fi in Austin, Texas, after we entered the market there. We're looking forward to seeing similar effects here in Nashville. So make-ready is a big problem, and it's holding back real benefits. What should be done about it? One-Touch Make-Ready provides a concrete, sensible way forward. By allowing all make-ready to be done with a single skilled workforce, a one-touch process will reduce the disruption to local residents, improve safety, reduce the city's administrative costs, and streamline the deployment of new networks for all companies willing to invest here in Nashville. One-Touch is already implemented by the country's largest municipal utility, CPS Energy in San Antonio. And it's supported broadly by policymakers like the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development, policy experts like Blair Levin, who authored the National Broadband Plan, community organizations like Next Century Cities, and industry leaders like the Fiber to the Home Council. We have also discussed this issue extensively with other attachers. We meet every week with both Nashville Electric Service and all other attachers, and we appreciate the collaboration that's gone on there. But given the multiplicity of parties involved and the tens of thousands of pole moves needed for infrastructure projects, the city is best positioned to fix this problem. It's your streets, your rights of way, and your prerogative to ensure an efficient process for all parties. We appreciate the work Nashville has done thus far to become fiber ready, and we'll hope you will pass this common sense policy so that we and others can build broadly and quickly across the city. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move, we're going to take all 4 before we take questions from the members of council. We'll just go down, now we'll do an alphabetical order, AT&T. Ms. Phillips? Yes. They're all on, so.
Swap around?
If you-
That's great, I'll swap. It's like volleyball, it's gonna rotate. That's good.
Yeah, they're all on and available.
I don't need to move it, it's the only one I've got.
Okay.
That one on? Well, thank you.
You have to move it closer.
Like it.
It's on.
Let's see, is that better?
Can you
I
hear?
don't think it's on.
Button she has to press.
Oh, it's.
Hello?
no, It's on.
Hello? The green light. is
Try
on.
the hand mic. Control equipment.
Actually, do you mind if I maybe just use this one? Will that one work instead? No?
Well, they're all on. Let me turn them off and turn them back on. Try it now.
Hello? Hello?
It went out earlier tonight, so apparently it's, try it again.
1, 2, 1, 2.
Try that microphone.
1, 2, 1, 2.
Well, I guess we could start in these chambers, couldn't we?
1, 2, 1, 2.
We have somebody coming to. Keep trying. I keep.
1, 2.
They're on up here.
One, two. There you go. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm Joelle Phillips. I'm the president of AT&T Tennessee, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I want to just start at the outset by saying we especially appreciate the interest in letting the businesses that do all of this work get together and see what we can come up with to talk in more specific detail about the actual process, as opposed to talking just sort of more generally about the concept of these things. We're happy to do that, and we appreciate having the additional time before the council votes so that we can make that happen. I know Councilman Pridemore really wanted to make sure that this meeting focused on process as opposed to, some of the other issues that we've talked about, sort of legal jurisdictional issues and the impact on the CWA. So I'm going to try to just focus on that, but certainly if there are questions about those other things, I'm happy to talk about that as well. What you guys are looking at, if you can see this screen, is just a very generalized description of the process that we use today pursuant to a contract that we entered into with Google to do the work that you all have been talking about. I think if you'll let me walk you through how that works, I can highlight several places along the way where we see some opportunities to potentially streamline the process. And I think I can also kind of describe a few places where we see the potential that the One Touch Make Ready ordinance, as it's been presented, would create additional problems as opposed to resolving some of the concerns that have been raised. So step one for us, we get an application when Google sends it to us, and that application can include multiple poles. It includes both AT&T-owned poles and NES or Metro-owned poles to which AT&T's lines are attached. And we've gotten applications for as few as 9 poles or as many as 117 poles batched together in those applications. And as of today, we've gotten applications for Google from Google for a total of 3,587 poles. So that's the total amount for which we have any application, whether it's our pole or another pole to which we are attached. The next step is that field survey step there. We go in that step out to visit the pole, and what we're doing is looking to see whether the design, the engineering design that Google's folks have prepared matches what's there at the site of the pole, so that we're sure that it works, it won't damage the lines, there's space to do what they've designed. We let them know if we see that there's a problem with that design, and then we develop a cost estimate for doing that work. And this is also the point where we identify those poles. It's roughly about half of them, half of all of the poles that we receive applications for which there is no need for AT&T to do any work before Google attaches or before Google moves on to the next process. About half of the poles in those applications are poles that NES has identified some other maintenance issue we need to address. All we have to do is confirm that we're going to address that, and they move on. So for that 3,587 as of this morning, 1,722 are maintenance only. So we're down to 1,865 poles that AT&T's been asked to do some sort of work on. The next step is a payment. That process, they notify somebody that they're ready to move forward on those things. We check to be sure there's money in the account to cover it, and we confirm to our AT&T construction folks that, yep, that one's been paid. And then in step 4, the work is assigned to an AT&T manager who schedules the work. So in terms of the impact on Google's deployment, we've already winnowed this down to about half because of which ones are just maintenance-only poles. And then about, the vast majority, over 80% of the poles then are poles for which we need to move the line. We don't need a new pole, we just need to move the line. And so we send somebody out to look at the site first, to look for things like, do we need traffic control in that area? Is it safe to work in the area? Is there a dog that needs to be in a fence? All the kind of things that, when the crew arrives, could slow them down. Once that stuff's done, the crew goes, and because our facilities are the lowest in the communication space on the poles where we are attached, we're going to go first. So there isn't some sort of waiting for another person first. We do ours, and then we notify Google that it's done. For those smaller group where there would be a new pole needed for some reason, maybe the pole is not big enough to accommodate all of those things, we set a new pole and we notify Google so that they can start from the top to move things safely. And I understand this sort of serial concept seems slow, but over time it has been the way that the entire industry has recognized is the safest way to work, and also the way in which things are least likely to be damaged. You'll notice along the bottom, I've referenced that weekly meeting that was described before, and that's a process where we all get together and sort of say, hey, where are we in the process? So let me just kind of walk through this and show you a few places where we see that time could be shaved from the process. The applications that come to us with engineering notes are engineering notes and design prepared by Google's contractor in advance, surveying the pole and designing the job. But frequently we are finding that the way the job has been designed, we have to say it doesn't work that way. Let me give you just one example. There is a thing called a guy wire. It's the wire that comes down at an angle from the pole, anchored to the ground. It helps hold the pole up. When we get our plans from Google, we find that frequently those plans have been generated with software that assumes you can have that anchor at the bottom within 3 feet of the pole. And what we know is if the angle is that steep, it would require about 4 times as many guy wires. So that's a whole bunch of extra anchors on the ground around the pole, and that's a tripping hazard, and we know that that's not a good idea. So we always say, no, we can't do it that way. But in the entire time that we've been doing this, we're continuing to get those same engineering design with that issue. So that's a good place where we could work together and either share someone who's doing that design work or correct for that problem. I mentioned that these come in batches with lots of different poles, and that's usually a good thing. We usually like to group things together for permitting and other kinds of processes like this. But in this instance, what we're finding is that the poles that are grouped together in these bulk applications are not necessarily geographically next to each other. So we get an application that has a pole on a street, and then it could be many applications later that we get the neighboring poles. That means we're sending people back to the same place multiple times to look at the work. It means when the construction crews go, it wouldn't be as efficient to do the work. That's a place where we could probably improve the process. We're also finding that when we're in the weekly meeting, Google's partner, Bechtel, who's helping to manage this work here in Nashville, will tell us that there is a pole that is a high priority pole, but it isn't the first pole for which we received an application. So we're not getting the poles requested in the same order of priority that Google has identified for doing their build. That would be another opportunity to improve the process. Those meetings are another thing that I think is worth highlighting, because what we find at the meetings, Bechtel does a great job of trying to kind of move through the information, and they're working from a set of data. They send us that spreadsheet in advance of that meeting, and we tell them things. They say, sort of, what's up on this next poll for AT&T? And maybe we say, well, that's one that's still in the design phase because we just got the application on that one. Or we say, you know, that's one that Google hasn't paid for yet. That's one where we need the guy wires in the wrong place. And those sort of things we've already told Google in the process. But the fact that we're asking about them again in the weekly meeting and that those notes aren't staying on that spreadsheet from week to week suggests that there may be an opportunity for some improved kind of real-time sharing of data about what's happening in the process. I know a lot of people use Google Docs for that, so that'd be a good opportunity. Just a few. So, you know, that's a place where there could be an opportunity to work together and improve the process as well. And I think that disconnect also suggests why it is that some of the information that we've all read in the newspaper looks so very different than what I'm looking at on my spreadsheet in my office. Because if you looked at the Bechtel data from that meeting without understanding sort of where things break out in the process, it might paint a different picture. In addition to lots of opportunities like that, if we talk about the specifics of this process as opposed to talking about this sort of general concept of make-ready work, I think there are a lot of places where the ordinance itself creates a lot of opportunities for things to be worse, not better. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Because the work we're getting, the engineering design, has consistent errors in it. The guy wire issue, often the design will show our line being placed lower than it can be placed to meet the safety codes. If that work proceeded as it would under the ordinance without our knowing in advance, because that's not complex make-ready, that's just regular old make-ready. All make-ready has guy wires and has to move lines down. If that work proceeded, then when we later were notified, what we would say is that has to be redone. So that's a second crew that's going to go back out to the pole now and redo it. And that assumes that in the time between the work being done and our learning, that it was done in a manner that isn't consistent with our standards. Nothing happened that was an accident and caused a problem that has to go be repaired. So the idea of one entity doing this makes sense, I think, conceptually, but when you think about how that's actually going to play out under the ordinance, it doesn't make as much sense. The only part in this process that AT&T is really not willing to change is that we only allow CWA-represented employees to physically touch our lines and move them. But that only happens in that AT&T construction phase at the end. There are lots of other places along the way where we use contractors, where we could coordinate, and that is an area that we would be happy to talk about in a meeting, and if it means changing the Google contract to address that, we'd be happy to. We are uncomfortable at the idea that the remedy to that problem is to pass a law that forces us to not perform as we had intended under our contract with the CWA. They have a contract too. This is a pretty business-friendly town, and we usually work business to work out problems before we ask you all to try to design a solution for us. So we appreciate your interest in letting us talk to each other to try to work it out. And we hope that you recognize that this is not a process that is needlessly complex. It's a process where people can get hurt when things aren't done correctly. Service gets interrupted when things aren't done correctly, and that affects other things. So as excited as we are about the potential that we know who's our Google contact now who can work on this, you know, for those of you who were surprised to think that Nashville folks couldn't be talking and working this out, I will tell you that I called Martha Ivester to say, hey, you know, what's up about this a while back, and she was, as always, completely lovely and said, gosh, I don't know, let me check, and it's a regional person, it's not Martha. So we haven't had a person here in Nashville with whom we could negotiate that kind of change. The Bechtel folks who are doing the operations in the meeting are not authorized to make those sort of changes. So there really is some value in letting us have an opportunity to talk about what else we can do. I know I've probably talked longer than I was supposed to.
1 minute over, but
thanks.
you're good.
Thank you.
Council members, if you're not aware, we're trying to keep it restricted in within 10 minutes of each presentation, just so, but so everyone has a same opportunity. So next, thank you, Ms. Phillips. Mr. Meckley, you're with Comcast. Thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this policy issue, which is very important to us. In fact, we have been talking about the challenges associated with deploying broadband in Nashville for several years. And I will just say as a preface to that, it is our policy to coordinate with other providers for that efficient deployment of broadband networks. We compete vigorously with AT&T, with Level 3, with other providers for the customer, but in the field, it is very closely coordinated work because there are going to be times when I need an accommodation and I don't call, but our guys in the field call their counterparts with AT&T, and they follow through and help them out of whatever the bind may be of the moment, because conversely, there's going to be a time when AT&T needs an accommodation, and that is truly the cooperation that exists in the field, despite the nature of the competition between the two companies, and particularly our marketing departments. But with that said, what we would look for in a policy is not only one that promotes the efficient deployment of broadband networks, but also one that promotes public safety, protects customers from the disruption of services, and also safeguards facilities and networks of other providers that attach to poles. So just to elaborate, I think most of you know who we are, but our perspective is one that operates 4,000 miles of fiber optic infrastructure, broadband infrastructure here in Middle Tennessee. We annually invest $120 million of capital in our network and have done so for the past 20 years. And those investments do facilitate the provision of the fastest internet here in Nashville over the years. So the provision of broadband is not a static issue. We have, in fact, increased our speeds 16 times over the past 13 years and now offer a 2 gig residential product here in Nashville and have since 2015. We've offered a 10 gig commercial product here in Nashville and have since 2010. And we're in the midst of a market trial that will deliver 1 gig speeds to residents through our cable modem, and we're expecting that to be available to every neighborhood in Nashville by the end of this year. So that's every resident that we serve will be capable of receiving a gig speed by the end of this year. Beyond that, we are committed to serving the community. A spirit of innovation and commitment to the communities are embedded in our DNA. That's manifest through a diverse workforce and that is representative of the communities we serve. We invest in neighborhood organizations with a specific focus on youth leadership, volunteerism, and digital literacy. And on that note, we're very proud to have connected over 7,500 families to the internet through our broadband adoption program, Internet Essentials. And we're also contributing to the growth of Nashville's blossoming tech industry and the development of tomorrow's entrepreneurs through our partnerships with Bunker Labs, which is a veterans-based entrepreneur center, the Nashville Technology Council, and the recent sponsorship of the 3686 conference. But we do know that part of the excitement at Google is also born with some frustration on our part. Many people have had a negative experience with Comcast over the years, and while we have been great innovators of product, there certainly have been processes that haven't worked best for the customer. And I will tell you that our CEO of Comcast Cable, a Navy SEAL, has said it's going to be our mission to make customer experience our best product. And we do have a plan to that, ranging from serving customers faster, even offering a completely digital pipeline to any interaction with us, simplifying the experience and fixing it right the first time. And certainly more to come on that, but I just wanted to provide some context. Specifically in Nashville, Our experience is that it takes about 200 days to install new facilities, new aerial facilities. However, our experience is different from Google in terms of that specific timeline. It takes us on average 90 to 120 days to get a permit from NES, and that's before the make ready step begins. Then it takes us anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, depending on what's involved in the project, for us to take the make ready estimate, get the check to pay, notify and pay anybody that has to do make ready. Make sure that we've got all our ducks in a row from a permitting standpoint, and then that make ready usually takes about 60 days to get done. And then after that, we apply for a permit from Metro Nashville Public Works to do the work, and that's about a 14-day turnaround time. So certainly we think there is opportunity to improve the process. Our experience with Google Fiber directly and accommodating their make ready, I will tell you that we have diligently worked to facilitate that rollout. We have assigned a dedicated project manager to oversee the make ready on Comcast's behalf that's required to accommodate Google Fiber. We attend the weekly meetings with AT&T, Google Fiber, and other utilities that are on the poles to coordinate activity. The average time for us to complete make ready after notice and payment is less than 30 days. Now, I will say that there is some factors here that are at play. For example, 78% of Google Fiber's requests for our make ready have come since May. So they've been very back-end loaded. And Google Fiber is paid for about 22% of the total requests. That said, as a stakeholder who believes there is opportunity to improve the system, we have some concerns with the policy that is before these committees and before the council at large. First of all, our experience with One Touch has been a 50% failure rate of facilities that Google Fiber has done make ready on our behalf. As Ms. Phillips suggested, and as the ordinance would allow, we were not notified that the make ready was going to take place before it did. We only found it because our crew was going out to do make ready and saw that the work was being done. So that's 6 make ready experiences that we know of. There may be more. And in that case, there was a 50% failure rate. The reality is nobody's going to care for your stuff like you do. So One Touch does remove a pride of ownership in caring for network activities. The policy results in diminished accountability for activity in the rights-of-way. And because of what we've already seen from a failure rate, I can tell you that it's not going to diminish traffic. It'll only increase traffic. Because as soon as we find out that One Touch has been done, we'll ride out there, we'll check it, audit the work that's happened, and then we'll go out again to repair whatever has been done incorrectly. So, based on our experience, One Touch could actually lead to 6 to 10 additional truck rolls, not a reduction of truck rolls. So we're concerned with the current the One Touch policy in its current state from a public safety standpoint, from an increase in traffic, decrease in service reliability when plant is damaged in the context of One Touch make ready. We think there's issues from a metro government standpoint in terms of the litigation and liability risk, concern about labor. And then for investors, there is the threat to our network integrity and the reputational risk. If a One Touch contractor impacts our facilities on the pole such that customer service are disrupted, they don't care who did the make ready work. They're going to come to us, who was the entity that they're paying that monthly bill to. So all that said, we do have some things that, based on our observation and our position in the marketplace, that we think can be worked on. Again, we think timely approval by permits by NES would be one. Right-of-way permitting requirements is another. One thing I didn't mention is that currently in the context of make-ready work, if we have to do make-ready on behalf of Google or anyone else, we now have to go to Metro Public Works and get a permit in order to do that work. And Metro Nashville is unique in that regard. Typically, make-ready is considered to be maintenance activity and doesn't require a permit. So the fact that we have a permit introduces incremental cost and a 14-day delay in the process of actually getting that make-ready done. Third, we've seen from our experience in working closely with Google Fiber in Atlanta that there are some opportunities from our experience there. Number one, in Atlanta, Google has established a drawdown account, and so that as soon as we're notified of work that needs to be done, we're able to do that work immediately without waiting for a check. Currently, there's about a 90-day time lag between the time we get notified of work that needs to be done and the payment is actually made. So in Atlanta, that window is shortened. And consequently, because we know that the money is there to fund the work that needs to be done, we're able to stand up incremental crews. So we have 6 crews working in Atlanta versus 2 crews in Nashville. We had actually staffed up to do more work, but we did not have the funding from Google in order to support the crews doing work, and so there's been a gap there that has kept the make-ready from moving as quickly as it could. But just, and secondly, from a project management standpoint, in Atlanta, again, as a product of the drawdown account and increased manpower, in our weekly meetings, Google's project manager gives us priority polls every week. And those priority polls are bunched in a tight geographic area. So the people doing the crews doing the make-ready can go from pole to pole to pole to pole, versus a situation that was earlier described where you're doing one pole over here, one pole over there, and one pole over there. And all that leads to a 10-month track record of doing 400 poles worth of make-ready every month, for a total of 4,000 poles that we've done make-ready on in Atlanta since October of 2015. Of course, you know, there's always improvement that can be made in the handoff from the first mover to the second mover, and then again, as I mentioned, through the permitting process. And then I think there does need to be systemic accountability across the board, so that if somebody is dragging their feet, there is a mechanism to ensure that they move along, or else there's some sort of penalty in order. So. Again, we appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this dialogue. We think it's something that is long overdue in terms of addressing the entire broadband deployment process. And we welcome, really for the first time, to engage in conversation with the other providers to see what those solutions may be. And certainly we'll work over the next 2 weeks to come up with some concrete solutions. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hill? The floor is yours. NES.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council members, my name's Don Hill. I'm the Chief Engineer for Nashville Electric Service. And I have just a few comments, and then we can entertain any questions that you might have. First of all, NES recognizes that there are definite efficiencies to the one-touch make-ready process. And we are directionally supportive of the initiative. The ordinance in its current form is workable from our perspective. I would like to say that first and foremost, our concern is with attachments, and is to ensure the safety of the general public, NES employees, and communication workers, and those folks. The established standards and the codes that we have and the foundation for the make-ready work are motivated entirely by those safety principles. NES also maintains a good working relationship with Google Fiber, with AT&T and Comcast. There's really a lot of good work that's done every day on that front that, you know, a lot of people don't see. And NES is a consistent and a reliable part of that process and those efforts. So NES, we believe that it's the best interest of Nashville for the city to pass an ordinance that all the major players can live with. And we're certainly glad to have an opportunity to be a part of the conversation and to move forward with a collaborative effort on that. So I'll leave it at that, and if there's any questions that you have for NES, I'll be glad to try to answer those for you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, council members, I guess what we will do, we'll just field the questions we'll just go from one entity to the other, if you wish, or we can just do a wide variety. So with that, we'll just, I wiped off some of the members' requests when we were working with the equipment, but I have the names. So Council Lady Vercher, if you would, you could be the first in line.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. Do I get to answer all? You want me to ask all my questions now? How do you want to do that?
Yeah, within limits, we'd appreciate it.
I got 3 pages back here, Chair.
Well,
Okay, so this question would be for NES, and then I'll save some room for my other colleagues because we may be overlapping in some of the thoughts as well. One is, how many polls do we have? And my second question is, why does it take so long as it relates to the permitting that Comcast alluded to?
Well, 80% of the polls that are in question are NES polls. And I'm looking at my colleague in the back. It was about 100,000, Nick? 200,000 total, right? Okay. Right. So, and the second part of your question is, why does it take so long? The make-ready engineering process, you have to look at each pole, and there could be as many as 14 different attachers on that pole. Most have around 3. And so what you have to do is each of the attachers has to have the opportunity to move their facilities down, or it could be up, to make room for the additional attacher, which in this case would be Google Fiber. So the process of, it's all the notifications, the engineering has to take place, and then the notifications to all the providers, and for them to make their moves, and then so one at a time has to occur. So that's, in a general overview of that, that's why it does take some time for it to happen.
Is that answer your question, Councilor? Okay, thank you. Councilor Weiner.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. And thank you all for being here. I know it's a late evening and it'll probably go on a while, but we'll try to make it brief. I want to expand just a little bit on what Council Lady Vercher asked. My specific question would be directed back to NES, Mr. Hill. Why does it take so long, 90 to 120 days, to permit and to even get the process started?
I'm going to let my resident expert, Nick Thompson, can you answer that question for her?
Need to use this?
Yes, sir, Mr. Thompson. Floor is yours.
Yes. Recently, in response, more than likely, to Google's build, Comcast has flooded NES with some applications. And per our agreement with Comcast, they're limited to the number of polls that they can apply for within a month. And they've exceeded that number exponentially. And so we're well outside that number, so it's taken longer to process those applications. We met with them, I think it was about 6 or 8 weeks ago, and requested a schedule of their entire build so we can bring on additional resources to accommodate them. We're still waiting on a response from Comcast on that. So once we have that, we'll be able to bring in additional resources and cut that time down.
So I have another question for him, Chair, if that's okay. Prior to Comcast providing you with all these extensive applications all at once, what was the average length of time? Was it still 90 to 120 days, or was it shorter?
Prior to our original agreement, yes, we've struggled to keep up with their level of activity, but we brought on, I think it's been about a year ago, a new contractor to assist us with that and the Google build, and we've done, I believe, Andy, we've done better than 90 to 120 days is what my records show, but we may have to agree to disagree on that.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to address Chris, the Google piece, in a perfect world, if everything was clicking in all cylinders, how long would it take you guys to roll out that which you want to roll out?
In a perfect world,
In a perfect world?
probably a little over 24 months, probably 24, 36 months tops it would take us.
Okay. And I have another NES question that tags back to what we were talking about, because I'm trying to get all the timelines in my head. Insofar as their 24-month rollout and the fact that we have all these hundreds of thousands of poles, and we have Comcast bringing on more attachments, and I'm trying to word this appropriately, once they get their 24-month window rolled out, what is the average monthly number of attachments on any given week that we would be looking at without all this influx of activity? Did I ask that right? Got that, Andy?
Yeah, I don't know that I have that information. Nick, do you? How many, is that how many, if, with all this activity, is that what you're saying?
No, without all this activity on any given Sunday, how many on average would we have without all this influx of activity? What I'm trying to identify is we've got a 24-month window, 36-month window, which is in the short term what we're looking at. Are we trying to pass legislation that is going to help us in the long term? Are we applying long-term legislation for a short-term fix?
Typical activity, attachment activity in Nashville has increased just an incredible scale, even before Google. So we were running in 2013 around 2,000 or 3,000 poles a year where people want to attach to our poles, and that hit about 4 to 5, and then, as he said, Google's like 80,000, and I think we have received applications for 4,000 or 5,000 on top of Google this year. So
Okay, so basically, once we get this hump taken care of, we're looking at anywhere from 4,500
perhaps
on average a year.
And we had one major attacher over the past 18 months. They've done a 4,000 pole build. So there's an incredible amount of activity. I don't know where the end is. It may not be in sight anytime
Okay.
soon.
Thank you. How often do we have to replace a pole because we have too many attachers in that 12-inch window that NESC allows us?
Well, it depends on the pole. You know, we've got poles that are, 70, 80 years old, and obviously we have a lot of newer ones. It just depends on the condition of that pole when we go out there and we do our engineering analysis on it. So it's hard to give you a good hard number. We're seeing some pole replacements related with the Google fiber work. It's not quite as high as what we had expected, but that's because of the condition of our system. So I really can't give you a hard answer on that.
Okay, thank you. And just as an aside, I grew up in this business in Memphis with my dad, so I know about that much. This is going to be a question that I'd like maybe everybody to opine or just share with us if I'm completely off base. Standoff brackets, I know they can't be used on all poles. Is that something that you guys have considered using as an alternative in some cases that might speed this process along so we don't have to have everybody moved and we can attach a standoff bracket? I know, and then my other piece of that is like, I'm trying to think of alternative solutions. I know that in Wall Street Journal there was an article that spoke to wireless transmission, and wireless is still going to have to take a spot on a pole, but is it going to require moving as much equipment as needs to be moved? And then the other piece of that, and you can answer it all at once if you want, would be how many, and I don't need a hard and fast number, percentage, an idea, a lot or a little is a good answer, in terms of how much redundancy is there in terms of AT&T or Comcast or any individual attacher using multiples of those 12-inch windows that we can attach to the poles. So that was all my questions, but that last one's kind of all tied together.
We don't currently have standoff brackets as part of our designs and our specs. We chose many years ago not to do that. I'm trying to understand the last part of your question, the multiple, how much redundancy there is.
In other words, do you have one attacher that's using multiple segments of the pole, or does each attacher have a 12-inch segment of that pole?
I would say that, Nick, you have to help me out there. I would say the majority of them have the one.
It's a mix. We have some that we limit. It's all about the pole analysis. So you can see AT&T lines that are very large in some cases, but in general, most of them just take up one spot. But AT&T and Comcast, in a lot of places, they'll have more than 12 inches.
Is lashing their equipment together an option to help move this along?
We don't allow multiple companies to overlash.
But if AT&T or if Comcast have multiple locations,
They can overlash their own.
they can lash their own. Okay.
Yes.
You might want to consider that when you guys sit down and talk. It might help on some of the polls. Thanks.
Well, if I can weigh in just on AT&T's perspective, we did a lot of the gigapower build that we've done in Nashville. I think we mentioned in an article recently that we're at about 80,000 locations, and during that build, I got a lot of questions from people about when we were going to get started, and I think it was because people were expecting to see new lines as opposed to recognizing that we were lashing on existing lines, and so we are trying to do that where we can to be efficient. But your question really does hit at something that I think is incredibly important to think about as you design policy for right-of-way, in that I think it's probably a mistake to think of this as a unique 24, 36-month, whatever period, because the technology is advancing so quickly in our business right now. Someone did an analysis recently of how frequently we are having to kind of change out things in the network, such that we are basically rebuilding our network every 8 years. The Wall Street Journal article talking about the ability to use wireless delivery architecture that doesn't even have to use dedicated spectrum, that's a really exciting kind of new area. And all of that means that a year from now, 6 months from now, what types of things might cause issues between companies could be vastly different than the things that are complex today. And if we change the law every time as opposed to giving folks a chance to try to work that out company to company, I think we may create more unintended problems than we potentially resolve. But the biggest point I wanted to make was that we are seeing that the changes in technology are requiring more and more and more work, but also different types of work.
I think Ms. Phillips did a good job of answering the questions, and I would echo the same. The technology is evolving, and I think from a policy standpoint, the question is, how do you facilitate the evolution of advanced networks and the deployment of those networks in a way that is not restrictive or requiring you to constantly update the ordinance. What may be good today, in all likelihood, isn't going to make sense going forward. But I think there are things, you mentioned the standoff brackets and overlashing. The pole owner typically establishes the standard by which everybody else attaches. It's their pole, and ultimately they are in control with how things flow. So I think there are policies that can be adopted that could, for example, encourage overlashing versus putting on a new attachment. So I think there are some opportunities there as well.
Thank you. Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Chair.
She wanted each one of us to comment, didn't you?
If you'd like to comment, that's fine.
I'd be happy to.
Certainly.
I won't repeat about standoff brackets. That's the jurisdiction of the pole owner as to whether they can be utilized or not utilized. For the subject of overlash is something that an incumbent can take advantage of. So a new builder of a network, one who wants to build to to an entire city infrastructure, cannot take advantage of that because they don't have a placement on the pole. They're working through the process to establish placement on the pole from foot 1 to foot 1,000 to foot 10,000 to foot 100,000 to the million feet, while the incumbents have networks in place and can take use of that opportunity. So the movement of technology is to fiber optics. Whether there's a last mile use of wireless technology today, tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it will still fully be supported by fiber optic infrastructure. So there is going to be a continued necessity for the building and the upgrade of fiber optic infrastructure. What's beneficial about fiber optic infrastructure for all the issues that we have to work on with pole applications is they are lightweight cables that don't bring a lot of wind reflection and don't put a lot of stress and demand on the poles. So there is a necessity to upgrade archaic infrastructure. And I would suggest the infrastructure throughout Nashville has not been upgraded every 8 years, from what I have quickly seen in just a quick walk around the city. So
Where you been walking?
I can show you copper cables that are decades old.
Well, I am just going to hop in right here to say that, generalized statements about what kind of infrastructure is here, I think if we're going to, we've heard a lot of statements about the process being broken or about what we need in Nashville. And, over the last 3 years, we've got a good $350 million worth of network infrastructure right here in Nashville that's just the AT&T infrastructure. It is, there's copper there, but we've also got more than 200,000 strand miles of fiber optics deployed here in Nashville as well. So, the assumption that that a party who's new and has walked around a little in Nashville can kind of diagnose the problem and describe the solution, frankly, one that the vast majority of what we've talked about tonight deals with delays in the part that NES works with, and I'm not suggesting that they are unreasonable delays, but the ordinance doesn't address NES's ability to use its own employees or choose its own contractors. It affects the ability of the other companies like AT&T, even on our own facilities, the ones that we have deployed over the last years here in Nashville, to control who touches those things and to ensure that they are moved in a fashion that isn't going to damage them or delay the process. And I'd like to sit down and talk about those facts before the same solution that was offered in other cities. So it clearly has not been designed for Nashville. We could talk about a Nashville-specific solution. I think that would be more productive.
Thank you. Any other comments on that? If not, Councilman Glover?
Thank you, Chair. I kind of want to take the opposite approach to what Council Lady Weiner just asked you in a best-case scenario. You said 24 to 36 months. I will tell you in my district, you're probably, I'm that 36 month, or I'm at least one of those, because in my district, even the two of the competitors that are sitting up there, some of my neighborhoods, my nicer neighborhoods, can't even get one of the competitors up there. So that just tells me that, okay, on best case scenario, 36 months. Worst case scenario, if we don't get this worked out, be it legislation or you guys sitting down and working this out amongst yourself, what's the worst case scenario?
Worst case scenario is it doesn't get done. Worst case scenario is either elongation or it just ceases to happen.
Okay. Because, I mean, we've sat here, and I like numbers. That's what I do for a living all day. I've sat here and heard 9,942 polls have been approved by NES for you guys. To date, only 33 polls are done, if I'm remembering that correctly. And so if that's the case, we're certainly not moving. We're moving slower than snail's pace is what it sounds like to me. And while technology, I know, will continue to evolve, and let's face it, when we were kids, well, when several of us were children, if they said we were going to carry around a telephone and a computer on our belt, we'd have laughed at them. And so things are moving obviously very rapidly. And so the point is, I guess, with this, I appreciate the sponsor deferring this for one meeting. I'm going to support that. I hope that when this comes back, then you've got a real solution worked out. There's one other thing I would like to hit very quickly. And when meeting with one of you guys, somebody talked about liability. And so if I can get you to, if you would, share with us what exactly that means, the liability of each one of the companies.
I'll start with that one. Because we have some direct examples to point to. So we have, I mentioned before that we have been one-touched 6 times, and this is a product of the agreement that Google has with NES today. Google did an agreement with NES that allows, after 60 days, NES can do make-ready on our facilities if we don't do it after 60 days. Now, one problem is that's not 60 days after payment, that's just after 60 days. So in any case, we were one-touched. And on those 6 polls, there were 3 problems of the 6, so a 50% failure rate. On one of them, there was a code violation where we were attached to, our facility was attached too closely to AT&T's pole. The National Electric Safety Code requires 12-inch separation between facilities. So we had one that was a code violation. Second one, our facilities were damaged. They were not bonded correctly, and the guy wire was not reattached. So you had a combination there of a code violation as well as a safety violation. And then the third one was a cable that hung over the road. And it was attached where the clearance was below National Electric Safety Code standard, which again creates a public safety risk. If you have a dump truck or a semi or a large vehicle moving down the road, they can rip down the facilities, which certainly causes an issue from a service standpoint, but it also causes an issue from a public safety standpoint if that cable is whipping back and there happens to be somebody on the sidewalk, walking, riding a bike, or what have you, never mind the traffic that is moving down the road. Under the current version of the legislation, that make-ready activity could happen with no notice at all to the existing provider. And so if you're, and so you don't necessarily know what's happening, where it's happening, when it's happening. And if it doesn't happen with the same level of care and oversight as the folks that touch our facilities or any other pole owner's facilities, then that creates liability for a variety of people. It creates liability certainly for the owner. It creates liability for the facilities. It creates liability for the contractor, of course, that did the work, and could even create liability for the city for requiring or allowing somebody else to touch our facilities without our having knowledge of it. So again, I'm not an attorney, but these are prospective liability issues that I can see just off the cuff.
If I could comment to that, it was suggested earlier, when this example was used earlier, that we did not provide notification before we were looking to make the moves that were discussed. We did provide notification. And what's also not stated clearly is that there is a process by which to perform make-ready, and then there is a process by which to have a quality check of make-ready and a full review. And in this case, the items that were reviewed by Comcast and noted to us were done in the midst of the process and not at the end of a complete process.
Well, and I'll just jump in to add a couple points. I think, what Andy's describing is a one-touch process that has already occurred via a contractual arrangement as opposed to what the ordinance would permit, and the ordinance would permit work to occur without notice being given in advance and would take away our ability to say, no, only we can work on our lines. And I think there are a few points. One is it takes away the clear, obvious, right now, if something's wrong with AT&T's lines, you know who moved AT&T's lines. It's, that's on us. And this will kind of introduce a little uncertainty into that world. The way the ordinance is currently drafted, NES does have some protection from liability around this, but the other providers do not. And I agree that the kind of liability things that often first come to mind are, what if it's done in a way that's not safe and an employee gets hurt when they go back to work on it again, or it's too low and there's an accident? And those are important liability issues to consider. More and more in our business, we see customers expecting service level agreements, so that the kind of liability that we would all kind of be facing are what happens if the service doesn't function. And I think you're going to introduce into that kind of dispute a lot of folks saying, well, it would have worked except somebody else moved my lines. And, so it's just going to be a new layer of complexity to add. So certainly before any type of ordinance like this were enacted, I would think it would make a lot of sense to figure out what is going to be the rule. How are we going to define whether a party was negligent in allowing a particular contract, or what are the standards that are the right ones before somebody else does the work? Because there are going to be, it's going to add some confusion to the process if somebody later decides to sue. And I am not terribly concerned that if something occurred that was Google's fault, Google's good for it, but the ordinance isn't just written for Google. So another provider comes along and maybe they aren't as capable of paying maybe they're willing to take a risk, but not as capable of making it right later because they aren't as financially robust. And I think that's another area you'd want to think about before you adopted that kind of, this kind of approach.
So in the case for us to answer about liability, we are obviously fully responsible for all the actions that we take within the city. We're doing that today and fully stand behind everything that we do. As I mentioned before, my longstanding history in this industry and starting as a technician and being well trained about matters of safety and quality, and as a leader now of this business, the matters of safety and quality are extremely important to me, and not just for Google Fiber. I am looking to lead an effort here in Nashville that is a good partnership and that is a good neighbor. I'm not looking whatsoever in any small de minimis form, or certainly not at any scale, to interrupt service of my competitors, nor to infringe upon the safety of the public or any workers on the pole infrastructure that we described. I'd also like to introduce, because it seemed to be not of awareness, Nick Fisher. Nick, if you just stand at the podium and introduce yourself.
I'm an operations lead for Google Fiber Nashville.
So Nick is the extension of my organization in managing Google Fiber's operation here in Nashville. Nick, how long have you been in your role?
I've been here since January of 2015.
So just there seemed to be some organizational disconnect of who is locally responsible for our operations. It is that man right there.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Council Lady Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I never thought talking about polls would be so sexy. So I just wanted to see, I thank you so much. It's been very informative. I have two questions. The first is, when will you all get together, the three companies along with NES, and have the authorized people that need to make the proper decisions come together and do that? And can you give us a date for that and some follow-up? That's the first question. And then the second question is, I am very supportive of the most efficient way to deploy technology, because I do think about our constituents, and it's very important. I think of it kind of like highways, So we have all these people that are not connected, and they really need to be connected. So I know that AT&T has a specific agreement with CWA, but what about other opportunities for other unions, and this is for each one of you, to do work? So if you could just answer those two questions for me, I greatly appreciate it, and thank you so much for your time.
I'll go first since we're on the expansion side of things. So we have a tremendous path in front of us, as we described. We're anxious to be able to speed up our operations. We believe, importantly, that working through this process and establishing this ordinance will enable us to do that and give us the opportunity to expand the workforce that we have here. And there is no restriction here for Google Fiber union, non-union, and our ability to do that.
Follow-up question. But would you be willing to enter into, I guess I'm concerned about contracts with unions that are able and that are doing the training. Are you committed?
Certainly, as I just stated, there's no lack of willingness to enter into agreements with all qualified companies, whether union or non-union.
Okay.
Yes.
It's a little open, but okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. And on when would we be available to meet, I live at the Bat Building, and I'm here all day, every day. So we can easily have decision makers here to talk whenever everybody else is available, and we'd be happy to host folks. With regard to, this question about what about other work that's available for union workers or other workers, the work that AT&T's partners in this CWA represented employees do, they do that as our employees. They're not contractors. They are our employees. But there certainly is nothing to stop Google or any other company from, engaging in a collective bargaining negotiation with unions. And I feel confident that there are I know there are plenty CWA folks who are interested in this issue. And but there is a difference between folks working pursuant to a collective bargaining agreement that, establishes their wages and other employee protections versus being a member of a labor union who gets extra work as a contractor. And I think, I'm sure that the folks with CWA, many of whom are here tonight, are that's an important issue for them.
So from a Comcast perspective, certainly we'd be happy to meet anytime. We can meet tonight, we can meet tomorrow, we can meet, we're open anytime to have this conversation. As I mentioned before, we have been raising our hand to have some public dialogue about the issues of broadband deployment for several years. In fact, I've talked to a number of other council members about this issue in the past. In terms of representation, we do have, our employees are represented in a variety of locations, and certainly we believe in the employees having that choice. So that's certainly something that does exist in many of our locations, and that openness will continue.
And it's just a quick question. So I think Google's the only group I haven't heard from. Are you guys going to send someone that's authorized to meet to make some decisions?
Sure. I just introduced him.
Okay, but is he willing to do it? You may have introduced him. Okay.
I'm willing to do it as well.
Okay, so we got you guys on record. Okay, you got to play in the sandbox together. We need y'all to play in the sandbox. Okay, and then the second piece is I wasn't clear on Comcast. Are you open to other unions? You said people can make choices. If you could just kind of speak to that a little bit more. I am pro-union. I'll just openly share that. I'm concerned about constituents and wages. So if you could just speak to that, I wanted a little bit more clarity.
So we have 850 employees here in Nashville. And certainly from an employer standpoint, we're absolutely focused on, just like anybody else, attracting the best employees. And Nashville is certainly a competitive employer market, and you got to do everything you can in order to attract and train a qualified workforce. In terms of representation, we have a national footprint. And certainly there are places across that national footprint where our employees are represented by a labor union. That they are not represented, the employees in Nashville are not represented by labor. They have not gone in that direction.
Thank you. Councilman Schulman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to follow a little bit up on what the council lady was just talking about, and it goes back to Ms. Phillips, what you said, and that is talking about Nashville and the businesses and the relationships that we have in this community, that we try to tend to work things out before we ever get here. So what you had said is that you try to work it out before you ever get to us. So my question was going to be, why are you all here? But understand why you're here. And at this point, without trying to identify, without pointing fingers at anybody, the idea is, okay, so how do we take advantage of this situation? We've got a deferral of one meeting. We actually have a kind of one of those flukes in the schedule where we have 3 weeks. So I guess the question would be, can you all, I think the council lady got you on record. The question is, are you all going to sit down in this 3-week period and actually start talking? You basically have 3 weeks. That's what we've got. NES is going to have to be sitting at the table as well. So is that what the idea is? I guess I'll start with Ms. Phillips. Is the idea, is somebody going to take charge of this stuff and actually call everybody to the table and see about talking through it?
Well, we haven't, we have asked to kind of get to the bottom of what is the problem being described. And as I said, Martha was quick to say she wanted to help, it just wasn't in her shop. And I'm glad to know that there's someone here who, I think what you're saying is that Nick is authorized to make decisions. I am, or can get someone else here to the extent that it goes beyond that. If we're talking about Nashville, though, that's me, and I'm happy to send an email after to try to get this thing scheduled, or, I'm not sure how else AT&T can facilitate it other than to say we can do it at our office, and I'll be there, and I don't have something more pressing on my schedule than trying to get this worked out.
Well, I guess the idea, Mr. Chairman, is that if all the groups are willing to sit down and talk, then somebody has to start the discussion. Somebody actually has to pull people together, and you actually have to all sit down together with the proper representatives. And so the question is, what I'd hate to do is have everybody committed to saying, yeah, we're going to talk, and then in 3 weeks, nobody's talked, and we're right back here where we started from.
I think I have the answer for you, Councilman Davis.
Yes, Councilman. The mayor's office actually was going to offer to help us convene this meeting, and so we were going to get all the stakeholders together. I may have failed to say that. I know I said at the beginning we were going to meet, but the mayor's office also offered to help, and so we could convene and get everyone together.
Then that's the ticket. I think the idea is that you want. It was Billy Lynch once who said, he was head of a number of different departments. He was talking about the pickup of garbage and trash pickup, and he said basically people really don't care about all the procedures that go into place in terms of getting it done. They just want to take their garbage can out to the street on the particular day, and when they get home, it's picked up, and that's all it has to do. That's all they see. There's a lot of procedures and a lot of things involved in this and a lot of processes. But I think if people sit down, maybe there's a chance that, like you said, Ms. Phillips, that we can be like the city of Nashville and we can get some of this stuff worked out. So I'm glad the mayor's office is going to do it. And if you need help from the council office, then I think we can help as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Davis, Scott Davis.
I see a lot of familiar faces in front of me: Comcast, NES, AT&T, and a new person. Welcome to our city. Good to see you.
Thank you.
I want to start off by just saying, I have good things and bad things to say about all 4 organizations, but less to say about NES, because NES is great. But in a lot of the issues, all the companies have tried their best to address it. But while we have the attention of the 3 largest telecommunication companies probably in the world, we need a workforce development plan that works. And Ethan Link, could you come up here, please, sir? Agent Ethan Link. Last year, a couple years ago.
We're going to stay on target.
Oh,
right?
we are.
Okay.
Ethan is a constituent of mine. He does work for a really good labor union. Ethan came with me with an idea maybe about 2 years ago. He identified the people that he was putting to work in my neighborhood and my neighbors. And one thing that's in need right now, that since all four of the decision makers, or three decision makers for each of the companies are here, is while you're sitting down working this out, there's no reason. I know the mayor's office is all for workforce development, especially with the new initiatives in the African American community to help address some workforce issues and concerns. The three most powerful telecommunication companies need something from this council. And there's no reason why we can't get a workforce development bill that works with this. There's no reason why. Everybody wants our help and our attention. Schulman, you're brilliant. I trust you. Ethan is a great resource, and which we all know. And the other unions are good sources. And also, the telecommunication companies, Comcast has done a good job with hiring folks in my community. So has AT&T. Google, you've recently come here, but Denise Day was a good addition and hire. More importantly, we need a workforce development. We have to put people to work. And there is no reason that there should not be a workforce development piece. I will work hard and stay up nights helping write it. I know, Schulman, I hate to volunteer you all the time, but I know you're a good sport when it comes to mediating things. But I'm sure any of us here, because everybody's talking about infrastructure. The poles, somebody's pole is behind, somebody has copper, but we are building more, better poles. AT&T's putting these new poles out here. Comcast is doing all this great stuff. Google's doing all this great stuff. I need to see some Nashvillians, more Nashvillians put to work. And I know we got a lot of emails from AT&T employees that lived out of the county, and then we got some more after I addressed that of people living in the county and work for AT&T. But before anybody gets their additional product, Google, AT&T, or Comcast, I need a workforce development program. And with the three largest telecommunication companies, and forgive me, but we can make this work. And while we have their attention, this is our time to get it, because I really feel this may be the only time we can get this done. We need more poll workers. We need more people putting in the infrastructure lines. And you three companies have the power to do that. And with NES guiding you, I don't see how we could not get this. And I'm asking all of you, I don't care what side you're on, make this a priority. This is going to be one of the only few opportunities you're going to have to put your constituents to work. And there's an easy way to track it. Ethan knows how to do that pretty well. He's done it the best so far. And so I'm asking you, the unions, everybody, you need to put our constituents to work with this, because they want something from us. They need something from this council. So put your constituents to work. And fortunately, councilmen at large, everybody that works in this county is your constituent because you're at large. So help me put Nashville to work. I know Anthony agrees with this, and a lot of other people. Workforce development. I'm sorry to preach, but I just can't. I can't take it anymore, sir. We have to put these young black men and women and minorities and more women to work when we have the opportunity right here. They need us. So let's put everybody workforce development, and no one's better than letting us know how to train people than some of our unions. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Davis. Councilman Cooper.
Here we are. Sorry. Thank you. I'll be super quick. If you didn't mind my making the suggestion to the mayor's office to recommend a mediator and to actually report back to us when and if you get back here whether any party was really not cooperative with this process. And I think there are a lot of business disputes that before they go to the courts or to the council, they go through this process, and it's only appropriate to go to this process and it be engaged in good faith. This is a suggestion. I want to thank, who's not here, Councilman Bob Mendez for this, but I do really want to get I think the mayor's office is a great spot to make sure that there is a mediator. I think you all need one. And then finally, I have a question from Councilman Roden. Why not wait until the federal lawsuit in Louisville is resolved? Super quick.
So if I
answer.
could comment
Yeah.
just on the point of mediation and the idea of meeting and just in the total context of even why we're here. Because we are looking to grow a business here and to provide competition, and you certainly have heard some rhetoric that is strongly opposed to this ordinance. And you've also heard a lot of numbers as far as progress and a lot of references as far as time, which suggests that the current policies and practices make it quite difficult as far as progress and time. And I just want us to be open and on the record in the sense of mediation and mediators as far as the places by which each of us is coming from and how easily the characterization of lack of cooperation could be appointed, and I'm talking to myself here as the reference point, because we are making the largest ask of this process, the largest change of this process, because it's necessary. Because it's necessary as a new incumbent through a very difficult process to work through as far as time and progress is concerned, and the overall disruption that it caused. And let me just state before it's restated, that does not mean any lessening of matters of quality and/or safety in what it is that we're looking to support. So,
I'm sure you'll be very persuasive to whatever mediator helps you. But I think that's the right process for this. I hope you'll do it. I hope the mayor's office will make sure that that happens. And welcome to Nashville. People are excited about you being here, but we also have a method of working out our differences here that I urge you to embrace. Thanks. Oh, the question about the Louisville lawsuit. Why don't we just wait until this is resolved?
well,
Because
obviously,
whatever you do is going to be undone by the outcome of that suit, possibly.
obviously I have a different opinion of the position, and I would suggest that I'm supportive of the action going forward, as I am here.
Anybody else to have a view as to?
I mean, obviously, we are litigating that matter, and we think it makes a lot of sense for Nashville to work to see if we can come up with, even if what we do is come up with a plan that is going to be an interim plan while you await, the outcome of that lawsuit, that makes a lot of sense. That suit has progressed to the point that we're, kind of past that initial motion to dismiss, so it is going to proceed, and there will be, a resolution of that we could learn from. Right.
So I think that I think there's an opportunity to address many of the concerns here outside of a process that is certain to lead to litigation risk for the city. So I think it probably makes sense to make best efforts to try to see what can we do in a business-to-business manner with certainly close encouragement by the mayor's office and city council, and let's see what we can do absent anything that's going to incur incremental costs for all involved.
Right. Well, you've got to share the same pole, so you got to figure out how to do that. Thanks.
Councilman Elrod?
If I could respond to that, I respect Councilman Cooper very much. The idea of a mediator, I think can be either council members or the mayor's office organizing meetings. I think what we were elected to do was to mediate, that these entities operate in the metro right-of-way. This is not a disagreement simply between three entities. They are operating in the metro right-of-way with which we were given charge to set policy for. So to hand that off to some kind of third party that was not elected to do that, I think would be irresponsible. So, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, Councilman Pulley.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the opportunity here. I won't be long. I'll be brief because we are having a meeting amongst you guys. out of which we hope a lot of information comes, upon which we can base some more questions later. But I did want to close the loop on this meeting. We've heard an awful lot of things said. Councilman Davis said the mayor's office has offered to do this. Councilman Cooper suggested mediation. So can we, Mr. Woodson, can you identify someone from the mayor's office who's going to facilitate this meeting and tell me when they're going to start that process?
Sure. And so what we've done is the mayor has asked actually for Mr. Cooper, as in Legal Director Cooper, to conduct the meeting with Mr. Jenkins and then to get all of the parties at the table and move forward from there. Mr. Cooper, do you want to add any more to that?
I will be in touch with NES in the morning and we'll try and get something set up as soon as possible.
If it's in Mr. Cooper's lap, it's in good hands. So I just want to ensure that this meeting is going to occur in the next 3 weeks, and some level of productivity will occur during that meeting, and we can reconvene and committee and talk about it. Okay, just have a few questions relative to that. Chris, with Google, you heard your colleagues speak after you did, and I just want to give you an opportunity to respond to anything they said in which you might have a dispute.
Nothing additional. We're just looking to grow a business here and bring choice and competition to the folks of Nashville. That's our focus.
Do you agree with the figures that were thrown out by each of them?
Well, the figures taken separately is what the challenge is. What's important to understand about Make Ready is that, you know, all things need to be complete to create the spatial opportunity for a new attacher. So describing each of them incrementally as far as their progress is not telling the full story of what we have to contend with. And these are not the only attachers that we have to interact with as well. So each of their progress points has to be understood in total, as well as, it was described before as far as many polls not having to have Make Ready. But if you have to think about poll lines as contiguous pathways. So you could have 2 or 3 polls without doing any Make Ready, and then you've got 2 that do, and then 3 that don't, and 2 that do. So, you know, you can add up and perhaps have a good amount of polls that don't require any Make Ready, but if interspersed amongst that contiguous pathway is polls that require Make Ready amongst multiple attachers, and you have to wait in serial fashion for it, you get the result of what I described to you, is we're waiting a long time for the process to occur.
Seems to me that payment's an issue here, and I heard that Google had only paid up to 22% of active polls. Looks like to me that could be a possible thing that's slowing up the process. Is that number accurate?
Not to my knowledge, but it's certainly something. Nick, you want to speak to it? Sure.
For AT&T, we do have a drawdown account for Nashville, so there should be no real delays on payment. For Comcast in Nashville, we do not have a drawdown account, but we pay within 10 business days. Besides that, we've paid for 700 polls to be worked by Comcast. As of last week, they had completed 168.
Okay, thank you. I have just a couple of questions for the other two. We're going into this meeting. Ms. Phillips, I heard you say a lot of things that Google can do to improve their process during your speech. I didn't really hear you say anything about what AT&T can do. Did I miss something?
Well, I actually think it was, it should have been described, and maybe I didn't do a good job of being in the spirit of how we can do that together. But, you know, we are not the project manager of their build plan. And so, you know, the information that we have that we're sharing, if they aren't sharing that within their organization, it's really kind of, it's none of our business. You know, we don't want to try to, and I'm sure Google doesn't want us to manage their construction. So we are limited in how much of the problem we can fix. And frankly, just the numbers question that you asked about, I think kind of highlights that point. The 23,000 polls for which Google says that they have begun a process, only 3,000 of those, or 3,500 or so of those, are polls that we have had anything to do with. And so to the extent that the ordinance is designed in a fashion that makes a very significant impact on AT&T, but less so on NES, who doesn't have to have contractors doing work on its poles if it doesn't choose to, doesn't have to operate without an exemption from liability. Given that the balance, the significant majority of the poles seem to be in that part of the process rather than in ours, that just seems not aligned to us. But we will do our best to, if the process identifies something that we can be doing better, then in all likelihood, that's something we can be doing better for our own work as well, and we should look at it, and we'll commit to do that.
Thank you. Hope this is a productive meeting. Now for Mr. Mackey, you indicated that one of your concerns about the bill was public safety. Can you expand on that just a little bit?
Sure. As I said before, there is a certain point of pride and really accountability when you have somebody that you pay either directly as an employee or indirectly as a contractor to do work on your facilities. And there's a certain amount of care that's going to take place that isn't there if somebody else is paying somebody to move facilities on your behalf. And so consequently, what we have seen is a increased likelihood of code violations and public safety risks because the work on the poles is not being done or had not been done with an appropriate amount of care.
Well, thank you for that, and I would hope that this meeting would thoroughly vet that, and you could share those concerns in great detail so that they can be discussed, and if resolutions can come as a result of it, it would be nice to hear. I would like to commend you for one thing. You did address something that probably is all on our minds, and that's customer service as it relates to this, and appreciate you addressing the need to address that. We are excited about competition for that very reason. We think competition improves that area of business, and as a representative of 660,000 some odd potential customers of y'all's, I know that customer service is very high on everybody's list. And we as council members, we're very concerned about deployment of infrastructure and making sure it's done. Any policy matters are done to address that properly. And we also care very much about policy changes and how they would affect our labor force here. So we'll be looking at all those aspects. And I appreciate very much you guys getting together, meeting, and us coming back together and hearing what you all have arrived at. Thank you very much for your time.
Council Lady Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Pridemore. My question was for NES. The gentleman said when Comcast shared that NES takes 90 to 100 days to get Comcast their permit. And is that just your assessment of the polls once they make that request? Or I guess what I'm hoping to understand is as you all go into this meeting and engage in this process. Ms. Phillips, NES, Comcast, I think you've all acknowledged that there are things in the process that can be tweaked. So I think it goes without saying that that all needs to be tweaked. But I also hope that you'll enter the process understanding that that doesn't necessarily mean this council isn't going to move forward with this legislation. So it's not that tweaking a few things is going to mean that we won't move forward on this. So I just wonder the extent to which, NES, if you're looking at 90 to 100 days, you've added a contractor to help with that response time. Is that an acceptable time frame for you? Could you employ 10, 20 more people, and you could get that down to 30 days? If you're 80% of the polls and you're 90 to 100 days, it seems that you're a big stumbling block in the process.
Just a couple of comments. I'm going to let Nick speak a little more to it. In general, we're always open to improving the process and the speed of these things. Now, attachment work, we're providing electricity. Attachers are kind of like the secondary non-electric revenue for us. So our first and foremost responsibility is for providing the power. Doesn't mean that the attachers aren't important, because they certainly are. So as Nick mentioned earlier, we've seen just an exponential growth in this kind of work in the city. So we have brought on additional engineering resources as well as electrical resources to help us with some of the pole work. But anyway, I'm going to let Nick, he probably has some more specific information he wants to add.
Oh, you did pretty good. We have, like Don said, we have brought on additional contractors. We are happy.
How many?
We have, I think, approximately 45 right now, which that's a pretty significant increase.
And those are
Probably
45 individuals, or do you all subcontract?
45 individual contractors working for us.
Okay.
Doing make-ready engineering.
Okay, the engineering itself.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and they work on Google projects, AT&T projects, Comcast projects. So we've recently been meeting with Comcast in response to their build. We have some contractual obligations to process their applications within 45 days, but that's limited to a small amount of poles. So we're in the process of meeting with Comcast to get some firm plans on how they are going to build out their network over the next year, year and a half, so we can bring in additional contractors to improve those timeframes, and we're happy to do so.
So from y'all's perspective, you meet with Comcast and you work that out, and you then meet individually with AT&T and you work that out, and obviously, maybe AT&T has some different considerations than Comcast might, but it seems like we've looked at things that are going on in Atlanta or here, or it looks like there needs to be some just more continuity and uniformity to the process. And if you all are, I guess, all coming to the table, I would hope that at a minimum you work out these and kind of look at what in an ideal world, how many people would you need to employ to get this down to? I mean, are we going to set a benchmark? I mean, I think the legislation does that, to say a certain number of days, but just from a process standpoint, I just hope that you all will, at a minimum, address these process issues. And also, though, recognize that if we move forward with this legislation, how are you going to make that work? How will you make One Touch Make Ready work? Don't go in with an assumption that if we kind of improve the process a little bit, then we'll not move forward with this, I guess is what I'm saying. So thank you for the clarity on that, and thank you.
Thank you. Council Lady Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it, since I'm not on this committee, you allowing me to
We're going right down the line.
Thank you. So some of my questions have already been answered, so thank y'all. Y'all have shared a whole lot of information today that I think we've all been kind of looking for, and to compare numbers and to compare notes. One thing that stuck out to me is that I'm hearing from AT&T, y'all are getting different lines or different polls sent to you at different times rather than like straight down a street. I'm seeing a head nod from Comcast as well. So my question is to Google, because you also just talked about how lines run continuously down a street, which, I mean, obviously we all know that. So if y'all are planning these straight down a street, then why wouldn't you just like I live on Orlando Avenue. Why wouldn't you send all of Orlando Avenue at one time? Why would you send maybe one pole from Orlando, one from something in Russ's district, one from the Nation, something like that? What's going on there?
Yeah, I'll let Nick comment on top of me, but it's not as if we're not doing that. I think we had some general commentary about things being in different areas, and I'm not suggesting they're not in different areas, but to suggest that we're not doing things into what we need logically for our build to go, and thus that's what we need the cooperation for, on making the moves where we need the moves made. Those are being put together, but I'll let Nick comment further.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things worth pointing out here. So without getting too far into the details of how the network is structured, if you think about it as roads, you have like loops that go around the interstate loops, and you have roads going off of that. There is some work related to poles on those loops for us. We call them rings, and there's probably some of that interspersed in different places around the city as we work on those pieces of infrastructure. So that could be part of it. The other side, as far as AT&T is concerned, I do know that we send a separate document for coordination that's just for AT&T that tries to order them and working with your folks, Joelle, to do the best we can to make it efficient for both sides. Happy to discuss further how to make that better, but there has been an effort to do that, and if we're falling short, we're happy to talk in more detail.
Okay, great. So it sounds like that's something that will be on the to-do list for Mr. Cooper's meeting to talk about how we're doing one street at a time or some kind of logical line there. So something else that I've heard, as already stated, I've got an amendment in here that talks about the collective bargaining agreement that I appreciate that AT&T has with CWA. I appreciate that I'm hearing from Comcast that y'all are represented by a union in other places, and I hope that you will consider your employees. Hopefully we'll move in that direction here as well, because I do think that those agreements ensure that we are having safe jobs, safety on the job for employees and the public, fair and just wages being put out there, and overall benefits and better employers, better employees, better jobs, right? What I'm not hearing from Google specifically is you said no lack of willingness to have union or non-union. So that's very non-committal. Do you have any collective bargaining agreements in where you are doing work now across the country?
So here in Nashville and actually throughout the Southeast, the largest partner that we build with is the Bechtel Corporation, which is a plus 100-year-old construction firm that has done projects all around the world of all different scale and size. And through Bechtel, through Bechtel and the use of Bechtel, they employ both union and non-union employees on individual contract terminations for the scope of work that, that we're building at any one time.
So I guess, is that because, like, here's something that I'm trying to figure out too, is so like I understand AT&T employees are their employees, and that's who goes out and does the jobs. Y'all only do, and so then they stay around year round, year after year for maintenance, and I'm seeing Comcast nod your head too. Is like, so these are like consistent jobs. What I'm hearing from Google is that these are jobs that are going to be contracted out to this company or to others, and other subcontractors may or may not be unions, but these are not like long-term jobs. These are just contractors to get your lines up, and I realize that these lines might not need as much maintenance, but what is your plan for in 2 or 3 years, or just routine maintenance?
Yeah, so again, perspective, 2 incumbents and a new entrant to the business. So we have to build a network first before we even have a business. And we are investing millions and millions of dollars here in Nashville to be able to establish a business and utilize a workforce to create the business opportunity. And we will have an ongoing workforce that's going to need to do installations and repairs and overall oversight and maintenance of a network. Now, less maintenance than traditional networks of days gone by, because it's a fiber optic network, so inherently less maintenance, but maintenance nonetheless. So there will be an ongoing workforce that will grow here in Nashville. And as I said before, Google has no unwillingness as far as how that workforce is hired and grow and built and developed for it to be union or non-union.
Right. So we're still not getting like a commitment that you would encourage or want to or seek out union employees the way that AT&T has, and we appreciate that. And so I guess just clearly, do you have how many subcontractors right now are union workers
I don't
working
know
for you right now?
Off the top of my head, I do not know.
Does Nick know?
Currently use IBEW employees, they're not our employees, through one of our contractors to do work on NES facilities.
Any estimate on your percentage of workforce right now, union?
I don't have it off the top of my head.
Maybe that's something that y'all could get to us in the future.
Sure.
And then, because it is late, but I am going to ask for an indulgence, we have heard from the employers. Could we briefly, with the chair's permission, hear from the employee representatives?
This is a panel discussing legislation that is before us. The contractors and subcontractors are not part of that legislation as far as what's on the table here. So we're going to stick with these four entities for the evening.
I was just hoping, since CWA is not necessarily a contractor or subcontractor, they are the employee representative
Right.
at
I
AT&T.
understand that, but I'm not going to open any can of worms. This is
I
the way
understand.
the way this was advertised and promoted, and whatever you want to call it, and that's the way it's going to remain. So thank you.
I
Council Lady.
appreciate that, and I am at the will of the chairs, and I hope that you all will reach out, my fellow council members, to CWA to also hear how this is affecting them. Thank you.
May I just add one point in response to the last question about full-time employees? And, there is obviously a difference between using a contractor that may use people to perform work who are union members as opposed to someone who is an employee who operates pursuant to a collective bargaining agreement that provides, assurances around a lot of issues that matter. We all like to be an employee that has some certainty around our work. But the reason I wanted to pipe up was we employ here in Nashville more than 2,000 folks, but we are hiring, and we are hiring for those union represented jobs. So I think in Middle Tennessee it's 50 to 100 positions, and I'm not absolutely sure how many will be Nashville based, but for those folks who care about this and are interested in workforce development, we are hiring. We find there's lots of maintenance to do on fiber optic and every other part of our network. So thanks.
Councilor, I just want to clarify something there. Prior to this meeting tonight, we had several requests for other labor groups and other interested groups, including the CWA, and I have to speak. We would be here probably until tomorrow. So I want to keep this on focus, on target, and there's going to be more and more discussion as it's already been spoken of. So let's just, that is my justification for that. I just want to let you know that. Nothing personal, Council Lady. Council Lady Vercher.
Thank you, Chair, for circling back around to me. And again, I know it's late, and of my 3 pages, a lot of my colleagues, they did ask a lot of the questions that's on my page. For Google, and this is for the viewing audience as well, how does Google decide which communities receive their service? That's my first question. My second question is, it was alluded to the contract arrangement as it relates to NES and Google, if someone can expand upon that as it relates to the notification and the payment. Is service being performed? Is utilities the lines being moved without the respective entity receiving payment or not? That's my second question. And my third is more of a statement or something for you to consider as an industry and moving forward, so we can get this right for the city and for the constituents that we serve. I welcome Google. I like competition. I'm not 100% sold on that. A resolution is the solution for this industry dilemma, so to speak. And in moving forward, whether that be with the mediation or the mayor's office, whomever that other entity will be, to spur the conversations along so that we can actually get this resolved. But as I listen here, we have a bigger mess long before Google even came to the table as it relates to, one, Comcast, the delay that it takes for them to get their permits and so forth. So I would make a suggestion, and you can take it back or not, if you would consider, instead of having legislation to come back before this body, for us to essentially try to legislate an industry standard, an industry practice, which I'm not really certain on how that's going to be enforceable anyway. If you could come up with some type of memorandum of understanding, I don't know if that's been explored or considered, or if anyone would be open to that. I thank the sponsor for working on this, and also for actually deferring it to allow us to have this type of dialogue to come up with a solution. And that's my last statement, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Lady Mina Johnson. Well, I was waiting. There was no response, so we.
I apologize. I got lost a little bit there as far as the frame of the question. So how does Google decide on the communities on which it builds? It is based largely on much of the matters that we're describing here, is the opportunity and challenge for how to build an area and what the cost and reachability is. So we look at the scale and scope and density of a community and the ability to reasonably invest to reach as many households as we possibly can. And whether it's in dense urban areas or more suburban streets, we look at all the factors required in the build to try to come up with the best balanced build plan of investment in any community. As you get out into less dense areas where the amount of investment required to reach less homes becomes more difficult, that becomes a challenge. So it's largely based on density and the cost of investment.
Council A. There were too many mics.
I guess I want to be more specific. For my constituents, when can I tell them that they will be receiving service? There's other areas in the city, they already have the service. When can I tell my constituents that they're going? How can I tell Ms. Linda on Rocky Mountain Lane that sent me an email as it relates to the ordinance when she's going to receive service?
Yeah, quite frankly, we will have a clearer view of your constituent area of the city and any constituent area of the members represented here as we work to improve this process. Right now, we've only been able to serve a small de minimis number of residents thus far, and that's why we're actively looking to improve that so we can serve your constituents as quickly as possible, as well as the rest of the members.
So I tell her 24 months, 36 months? What?
Yeah, I don't have an absolute specific answer for her. I would like to, and I want to have a clear path, and I want to bring service to her as fast as possible. We would like to wire Nashville as quickly as possible. That's the challenge that brings us here today, is we don't see the ability to do that in an efficient time or level of production as far as the number of customers served.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Council Lady Mina Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Comcast, AT&T, Google, and NES, all the representatives being in here. What my constituents want is fast and reliable internet, sooner rather than later. So, I'm so pleased to hear you all sit at the same table and work out the little kinks. And that will be most, important things. But, today it would be Comcast or AT&T Uverse or Google. But what I'm hearing is, even though technology is improving, we still have to rely on some type of cable attaching to the pole. So if I'm not mistaken, I don't know, I'm ignorant, I don't know how to properly attach the cable to the pole, but I'm guessing it's not a corporate secret. So maybe you all can sit together and establish some industrial standard to, how properly and safely and reliably attach to the pole. So if you can do that, that will help entire city of Nashville. And I think that's the most important thing. And because, today, as I said, I don't see it's just a 2 years or 3 year approach, because, the copper, today maybe copper, next maybe, fiber optical cable, and then it might be another method. So it seems like we will be relying on some wire attaching the cable. So I really hope you can come up with really reliable way to establish industrial standard. Can I expect that?
Councilwoman, the standards actually already exist. I think the issue here is the reliability of who is actually moving that wire and their capability to comply with those standards.
Any others?
I would just comment to top that, because it leaves the feeling that, that at least has been commented about certain scenarios, is that we would use or have a lack of responsibility in using qualified folks, and that is not the case. We use folks that are approved to work in the space by the owners, and we use qualified people, and we hold them to those standards. Are there always issues of checks and balances with regard to quality and safety? Absolutely, certainly, and I'm sure my colleagues have checklists and checks and balances with regard to quality and safety that they have to work through as well, and that is expected to follow those standards.
Thank you. I may not be clear. My perspective, I did have NES pole upgrade, like electric wire upgrade. First, they came and put the pole on the ground. And next came, NES put the brand new wire. And then next came, AT&T comes, put the telephone. And next came, Comcast came, attach the cable. And then all the wire removed from old pole to new pole, and then somebody comes in and pick up the old pole to remove it. But if by any chance somebody, I don't know which one, but forget to detach the new wire to new pole, the pole is just sit there. So, it's just inconvenient and disruption to the neighborhood. And I think maybe tomorrow will be Google, but next day will be AT&T with new copper. So more you can work together to come up with disruption, more as a city will be better. That's my perspective.
May I just add one comment in response to that, to your comments and your question? We also want to find more and more ways to make the process that you described as streamlined, as fast, as convenient, and safe as possible. But I do want to make sure that everyone is clear. The reference to copper earlier, we are not deploying copper today. We may have deployed more fiber optics in this city than anybody. We're, more than 200,000 strand miles of fiber already deployed. We're deploying more and more fiber every day. So you're right that the kinds of facilities that we are now, all of us deploying, are similar in the communication space. But even with that, the examples that I provided earlier today, the engineering designs we are getting from an incredibly sophisticated company, Google, using a very sophisticated contractor, Bechtel, have consistently incorrect guy wire placement, have consistently drawn the drawing where our facility is too close to the ground. So what we need to figure out is a way to work together to be sure that it goes as fast as possible, but it doesn't go fast because it hasn't been done correctly. And I want to make sure that people understand that we're focused on that, and what we are deploying is not something that's old-fashioned in comparison to other people deploying something that's new.
Thank you. Council Lady Allen.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson told my story, so I'll just say, I've had the same experience with the pole. The new pole gets built, and the last wire sits there forever, and that pole stays in my sidewalk for a year or so. So, to me, I'm excited about this conversation that in the end, whatever happens, I hope we're going to have a much more efficient system where the wires move quickly one after another, and our sidewalks are open and free, which would be great. So to that end, and to follow up on her question about technology, is the attachment, I've got 3 questions. Is the attachment technology essentially the same for all of your different kinds of communications? I'm seeing some, kind of nods. Can y'all answer that, and then I'll ask another question?
I would say by and large, yes.
They generally are. And so it's not a different set of skills to move an NES wire, an AT&T wire, as opposed to a Comcast or Title III or whatever the other ones were. It's essentially the same technology.
I would say between the communications providers, yes, it is not necessarily the same kind of familiarity, skill set that folks who primarily work on electric wires would have, and the familiarity with the standards that are kind of common in the industry among attaching entities.
Right. And so when these things have to be moved, is it generally just in the communications area, or does electric wire also have to be moved out of the way?
Sometimes electric wire
Sometimes
has
as well.
to be moved as part of the overall design and the pole load requirements that are added, depending upon whichever one of us may want to do work on a pole. But if it's an NES pole and you're providing make-ready engineering for what you want to attach to the pole, based on the standards and requirements and what's being added, that there may be necessity, as well as what is found to be present in the situation when it's surveyed. There may be things that are already present that are out of compliance that, as the process is being worked, have to be adjusted.
Right.
if
And
that
so
helps.
if you were moving both electrical and communication, would the same contractor do those, or you would use
Well,
two different?
It could, in the say, but only there's a greater qualification to be working in the electric space.
Makes sense.
But could someone who's qualified in the electric space work in the communication space? Yes, that hypothetical could be true.
Gotcha. And then, I've heard some conversation of working together on the attachment areas. Just, even though you compete for the same business, that often there is cooperation between stuff. Do your contractors ever move other people's stuff? You mentioned sometimes you're out there and another attacher needs something happen. And does that ever happen today?
It's typically not the case. Typically what happens is you have every owner has their own employees or contractors handle our facilities, whether it is maintenance work, whether it's construction work, whether it's make-ready work. And so there is a certain comfort level there with the qualifications of the people that we hire to touch our facilities and upgrade, maintain, whatever it is, versus somebody else.
Right, and then final question. I know when there is a big storm and there are a lot of electrical lines knocked down, there are whole teams of people from one city that come to another to sort of fill in the short-term gap, and then they go back to where they came from, and there may be some that just rove doing that. It sounds like we have a bubble here where clearly we're going to need more people for some amount of time, and then there may be the next city moving on. Is that a group of people that could be trained to move all the communication stuff, whether we go with the current way we're doing it, or hopefully streamline the existing process so that there's not a 60-day gap between each person moving?
For matters of simple moves, where things, as were described before, where things are just being moved up, things being moved down, where the moves are simple, the answer is yes. Where things are more complex and there may be a service disruption, or that there may be a necessity for a service disruption to affect the move, then those things would need to be handled by the service provider themselves.
Gotcha. And then final question. My understanding is that your current proposal is to allow the owner of the pole to pre-approve contractors that you would use. Is there the possibility of also allowing the attachers to also be part of that pre-approval process, so that their contractors as well could be on that list?
I think the challenge is that leaves open the opportunity we never come to conclusion. So who has where does the final say end? So that's my concern for a loophole, that there's no conclusion if everybody has an equal say. So that's why I would defer to the pole owner to have jurisdiction and qualification.
Thank you. Councilman Glover. Would you like to speak?
If I could just comment, I think Chris made an important point about the importance of having the complex moves be relegated to the owners of the facilities. And the current draft of the one-touch ordinance actually allows the third-party contractor to make those complex moves within 30 days or after 30 days. And so that's certainly something that we see as a problem with the current iteration of the one-touch legislation. 30 days from payment. That's an important distinction that we certainly want to. Our contractors expect to be paid for the work that they do, and to your point, just like in storm situations, there are contractors that we can bring in and mobilize to do incremental work, but you really have to have that payment established up front in order to keep those crews busy, or else they're going to go somewhere else. And so that's one of the importance of creating a steady flow of payments for make-ready work.
And if I could add just a couple things on that. The idea that when the work is not considered in the decision of the pole owner to be complex or not, well, so NES, for 80% of the poles to which AT&T is attached, will be deciding whether it's complex or not. And the kind of problems I was alluding to before about guy wires and lines being too low, that is not complex work. So I have real concerns about, the idea that, well, we'd never get around to making up our minds about who'd do the work. The person who owns the facilities whose lines are being moved really ought to be a primary part of making decisions about how that is moved. So that just seems illogical to me. This also kind of glosses over the concern that we have an agreement with the CWA that they do that work. We also have part of that agreement is that we don't make them do work on other people's facilities. And so this is, if we did it via ordinance, going to prohibit AT&T from performing as AT&T had intended under that agreement, and that's another reason we would really hope we can find some other ways to improve the process enough that we don't have to move to this idea of not letting our own employees be the people who move our own network facilities.
Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Chair. I know we're talking about strictly poles here, and I'll be the first one to tell you I don't understand any of this. This is not what I do for a living. So I do remember, though, about a year ago, I think maybe a year and a half ago, when this conversation began, we have literally miles and miles of fiber under the city that's black. And I was just wondering if we're not allowed to talk about that. Okay. All right. So we'll stick with poles. Sorry about that. Understand. I mean, I don't.
Do you have a question?
Well, the question is, I mean, has that left the building? Is that no longer a part? I mean, why? I guess.
And you're talking about dark fiber under the streets of Nashville. Okay, well, certainly everything in the downtown area is underground, our network. And NES maintains, we have our own fiber network for our own internal purposes. We have that underground in the downtown area. We also have it around the city aerially and on our own poles. So, did you have a specific question about that? I mean, it does exist. It's not in the,
Okay.
we don't have the quantities
Well, there was just a conversation, and then it just kind of went away, and I just, I didn't know if it was still a part of the conversation or if it can't be a part of the conversation. So I guess if it can't be, then I'll hush. If it can be, then I think we should be talking about it.
Are we talking about utilizing our cable? Is that our fiber?
I think that's one of the questions that was asked a year or so ago.
Oh, okay. I think probably the answer to that is we don't have the capacity. We're not talking about the kind of fibers that Google or AT&T or Comcast are deploying.
Okay. All right, that answers the question. All right, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Swoop? Okay. Councilman Anthony Davis, you're the last one in the queue.
Turn me on. Is it on? Oh, there it goes. Thank you. Thanks to everyone again. I just wanted to kind of come full circle, bring it home. I did have one small nuanced question because we've been talking a lot about the pole owners and the subs. So the way it's written, AT&T is, a pole owner, and they would say who does the work on their poles, and then NES would say who the subs are that do the work on your poles. And so my understanding is you would manage the subs list. Is that correct?
The way the draft is right now, well, NES does not need to be in the business of approving a communication contractor. Now, we do approve the contractors that do the complex make-ready. If there's a pole change out, if it involves the power space, we need to make sure we keep that distinction. One Touch Make-Ready talks about the communication infrastructure. One Touch Make-Ready has nothing to do with the power space. So when we're talking about that kind of work that involves, if we've got to relocate some of our electrical facilities or the pole, that's outside the scope of the ordinance.
Right. I'm talking about the communication side. So one, I was glad you said that you think the ordinance is workable, but number two, I think we just need to have further discussion about that. Our expectation would sort of be that you're managing the subs, or we need to come up with some kind of formula for that. So we'll continue discussion on that. I just also wanted to say I'm excited to hear everyone say they're willing to work together. We have a willingness to work together. We've got 3 weeks to put any amendments together. We would like to see any amendments prior to the holiday weekend, just so we can kind of vet those and figure out what we have as far as amendments. Obviously, we'll have the meeting long before that. And then I had one generic question just for the panel. Why does the Tennessee ECD, the Broadband Report, even now the Hillary Clinton campaign and Brookings think that One Touch is a good policy?
Because it drives efficiency, it drives investment. I mean, that's simply the way I would look at it. It creates a policy that enables faster investment and faster path to choice and competition, all while managing safety and quality.
And I guess I'd say that I'm assuming you mean ECD adopts that because their consultant's report references it. And I think they've been very careful to say that this is a report that they have asked a consultant to make, and that the governor's administration is going to evaluate how many of the recommendations they think make sense in Tennessee. So my understanding from Commissioner Boyd is that is a process that they are evaluating, not that something that they have endorsed everything in that report. And I think a lot of the reason you see think tanks and political figures, talk about One Touch Make Ready is because it's in the hypothetical. And we agree hypothetically if there are opportunities to use one contractor on a project, then that can be more efficient. There are places in the country where by contract, as opposed to being forced to do so by an ordinance, we have found a way to make that work. And as I mentioned before, there are lots of places in the line of this process that are not the part that the CWA does today. So my instinct is that, the reason you're seeing a lot of excitement around that is that broadband is an important thing, and a lot of political leaders and policymakers are interested in it, and you are not seeing that kind of uniformity in opinion from those folks who, make the hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in actually rolling out the fiber. I mean, as I think Google Fiber has made it clear, they are new to this world. AT&T was the largest investor in the U.S. for many years in a row because we consistently are building these kinds of networks, and that may inform why we see differently where we can improve the process.
And to add to that, this is clearly a complex process to accommodate new attachers. There's a lot of moving pieces, and from our experience, what needs to happen in Nashville is better communication amongst the stakeholders, better coordination amongst the stakeholders, and to address issues that are specifically on the ground versus adopting legislation that creates more problems than it actually fixes. The same as Joelle mentioned, we have contractual relationships with Verizon actually in other parts of the country where we do use the same contractor to move facilities. So there certainly is opportunities in business-to-business relationships to create efficiencies. And certainly we appreciate the opportunity to have conversations as to where those business-to-business relationships can exist versus rushing to the city council or other government entities to try to fix our problems first.
Thank you. If there's no more comments, Chairman Elrod would like to make a statement.
I guess also to piggyback on Councilman Davis to kind of bring it full circle, and I guess put it back at the 30,000-foot level to kind of what Councilman Schulman said. Our constituents, I think, have asked us to create a business-friendly environment in Nashville, and also with that, they want more consumer choice with internet providers. And with One Touch Make Ready, there's an opportunity to be a pro-business and pro-consumer bill all in one. And so I would ask that the parties, as they get together, and whether it be council members, folks from the mayor's office, from NES, as they get together to, this is one of those kind of things where at least the proponents of the bill, and I think our constituents are not wanting incremental changes. It's one of those kind of things at the end of a football game when you're down a couple of touchdowns, why are you kicking a field goal? So I would just ask that of the parties that our constituents are asking for other entrants that are wanting to make millions of dollars investment for Nashville to be an open city for that. So that means creating a pro-business environment, and now with this bill also a pro-consumer legislation. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, with no other members in the queue, we have a motion, and it's been duly seconded on BL 2016-343 for a one-meeting deferral. We need to have each committee vote separately. So, Chairman Elrod?
The members of the Public Works Committee, all those in favor of the one meeting deferral say aye. Aye. All those opposed? We move for deferral.
Same as the Budget and Finance, all in favor of one meeting deferral? Aye. Opposed? One meeting deferral passes. The Budget and Finance joint meeting, Public Works, is concluded. Thank you.